Hi, I'm Kit Bell. In this video, I'm going to be taking you along on the journey to finish the mixed media piece that I started in the video Finding My Creative Flow Again. From the beginning to the end, join me and discover the processes and techniques that I used to finish what I started. So I've gone through the first exploratory parts of this, pushing papers around and overlapping other papers and seeing how I feel about it. And I think this is the basic underlying design I'm going to go with. So at this point, the next step is gluing these pieces down. So I've glued this down, trimmed the edges to get it tidied up. And by the way, these pieces that are left over from my cutting and trimming for this particular work, I keep those in a Ziploc bag because I'm going to be doing more along this line for this particular series of work. So, you know, those will come into play in other work for sure. Now, I've contemplated this for a while because each piece evolves on its own and in its own time. And I think that the next step I'm going to do is to put this light negative down. So this light negative, when it gets glued down, you'll see how much more transparent it becomes. So everything underneath will show through. And it gives some of the boring areas, the areas which just, you know, haven't got a lot going on in them by themselves, it's going to give them a bit of texture and something that I'll be able to work into with paint as part of the next part. So that's my next. My next step is I'm going to glue this down. I'm going to go ahead and show you a before and after picture as a comparison so that you can see what it looks like before you glue it down and after you glue it down. My gluing process is to use matte medium. I'll put matte medium underneath first. I'll lay the tissue in the correct spot over top, and then I will put a coat of matte medium over top as well. And I think that that provides a little bit more transparency of the tissue than if I just had the medium underneath. So before I start painting into this, just a quick catch up. I have decided to put a white circle on it right in here. That's going to be nice and bright behind my foliage that'll be going on top and create a bit of a center of interest with the viney leaves and things. So I've marked this out on the piece so that I can cover that with a good coat of white. The other thing I decided was to put a little snippet of text down here. I do like a bit of text in my work. And what I had to do was I had to try to see which color would go best for it. So just cut some strips that are about the right size and just went through the color gambit sort of to see, you know, is a really light value good? What about something darker? And the winner is this one. So something that is a bit of a mid-tone, not too dark, not too light, and is cool against the warm stripe over on this side. So that's the first layer of paint. I may give this a second coat before I collage the next set of tissues on. I'll just have to see what it looks like when it's dry. So I went ahead and put the background tissue on, the lighter one of my second positives, and almost blew it. I was working from the top down, sort of doing this much at a time, holding the tissue up, putting some more glue down, lowering it down, putting glue on top. And I got to about here and realized that it was upside down. So I very gently picked it up and turned it around and put it back down, and fortunately nothing tore, nothing rumpled, and I've got it down on the canvas. So I'm going to be a little bit more careful with this one. So this one needs a little bit of a trim before I I do this. And I want to show you a little trick here. So up along here, I've got kind of a harsh line with the purple. And that just happens sometimes on the edge of the plate. So if I take a water brush, or failing that, just a regular brush in a pot of clean water, I can just basically draw a wet line around my foliage like that. And then, you know, the tissue just comes apart. I'll also do this if I need to separate two parts of a tissue. Perhaps I want to use, you know, one section of it in one work and a different section perhaps another time. So I'll do the same thing there. And in some cases I'll be a little closer to the edge in terms of edge of the plant material, so I have less excess tissue. And sometimes I won't worry about that as much. Okay, and for me the easiest method of doing this is to position it on the panel where I want to be. I put my gloss medium in a little container so it's easier to get at. And then what I'll do is I'll pull back the top part. I'm sure there's lots of different ways people have of doing this. And I'll apply some of the medium up there. Get some more medium on my brush. And then as soon as I put it down, I just smooth it out with my brush. And that works out pretty well for me. I get the odd wrinkle, but you know, I'm not really worried about the wrinkles. And right away it starts to show through better in terms of what it's going to look like once it's glued down. And at this stage, if there's not a lot of contrast, I don't worry that much because I know I'm going to accentuate some of it with paint anyway. For example, this top layer, these foreground vines that I have, I'm going to want them to stand out a bit more, so I know I'm going to work into them with some paint. Okay, so I'm going to let that dry, and then I'll give you a view, a comparative view of what that looks like once the medium has dried on there. So I'm ready to start painting on this now. I've got everything collaged on. I've got a nice strong image from the last tissue. And so I'm going to start working into it with a bit of paint. Now I've got the paint out on my palette. I use a Stay Wet palette to keep the paint from drying out. And I'm sticking to the colors in the range that I had with me at the time I created these botanicals. And I'd like to note that these are just regular acrylic paints. They're a combination of Golden's regular heavy-bodieds and one of our art store brands, Opus, some of their paint as well, just in a heavy-body paint, not the open acrylic. So there's the first coat of paint on. What I like to do first is I like to pick out the highlights. So that gives me a little bit more definition. So here is the piece after the painting's been done. And it's always hard to say if something's finished. I may look at this over the next couple of days and decide to do something else. But primarily I was doing some highlighting, bringing up the whites, doing a bit of glazing to bring in some of the colors, added a little tiny piece of collage down here. It felt like it needed it. And I've done a little tiny bit of linear work with a couple of my Posca pens. And these are really handy to have if you like that. They're just acrylic paint in a pen, and they work extremely well. If you'd like to see more about the individual processes, the selection of foundation tissues, the layering, the glazing, the veiling, the painting, I'm going to link my mixed media video series for you, where I go into each of these steps at greater depth. Happy painting.